When I was 8 years old, I told my parents there was a man living in our ceiling. They laughed it off, said I had an overactive imagination. Kids see things, they told me. Shadows, shapes, tricks of the light. But I knew what I saw. At night, when the house was quiet, I would hear scratching. Faint at first, like the whisper of fingernails against wood. And then, tapping. Slow, rhythmic. Coming from inside the attic above my room. I told my dad, but he said it was rats. He even went up there once, shining a flashlight around the dusty, cobwebbed space, knocking on the beams to prove it was empty. "See?" he said. "No one's up here, buddy." But I knew better. Because sometimes, in the middle of the night, I would wake up and see him. A shape, dark, too thin, pressed against the ceiling like a stain. His head was tilted too far to the side, his limbs bent at sharp, unnatural angles. He never moved, never blinked, just watched. I stopped sleeping in my room after that. I begged my parents to let me sleep with them, and when they refused, I snuck into my sister's room instead. She thought I was being annoying, but I didn't care, as long as I wasn't alone. Then one night, I made a mistake. I woke up thirsty. My sister was asleep, curled up with her blankets pulled high over her head. I didn't want to wake her, so I tiptoed out into the dark hallway. The house was silent, the air thick with the smell of dust and old wood. I crept into the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water and took a sip. Then, the tapping started. Slow, deliberate, right above me. I held my breath. It was louder now, no longer just faint scratching, but a sound like fingers drumming against the ceiling. And this time, it wasn't moving randomly. It was following me. I took a step. Tap. I took another. Tap, tap. And then I felt it. That awful, skin-crawling sensation of being watched. I looked up. He was there, right above me, pressed against the ceiling, his limbs sprawled unnaturally, his head twisted upside down to face me. His mouth was too wide, stretching into a grin that didn't belong on a human face. And his eyes, black, sunken holes, locked onto mine. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. Then he started crawling, not climbing down, crawling across the ceiling, his fingers digging into the wood, his limbs bending at impossible angles, coming closer, coming for me. I dropped my glass. It shattered against the floor. The sound broke my paralysis, and I ran, sprinting back, to my sister's room, slamming the door shut, diving under the blankets. I squeezed my eyes shut, my body shaking, waiting for the tap, tap, tap to start again. But it never came. I stayed awake the rest of the night, listening, waiting. Nothing. The next morning, I told my parents again, begged them to check the attic. My dad got angry, said I needed to stop this nonsense. But my mom must have seen the terror in my eyes, because later that afternoon, she convinced him to go up there one more time. This time, I watched. My dad pulled down the attic ladder, grumbling the whole way, climbed up, shone his flashlight around. For a long moment, everything was quiet. Then I saw him freeze. "What the hell?" he muttered. My mom called up to him. "What is it?" He didn't answer right away. When he came down, his face was pale, his lips pressed into a thin line. He was holding something in his hand, a crumpled piece of yellowed paper. There was writing on it, scrawled in jagged, uneven letters. "I see you." That night, my dad nailed the attic shut. I never slept in that room again. But I don't think it mattered. Because years later, after we moved out, I saw something strange online. A listing for my childhood home. The pictures showed all the rooms, newly painted and furnished. but when I looked at the one of my old bedroom, I felt my stomach drop. In the top corner of the photo, near the ceiling, was a small, dark stain. A stain that looked just like a smiling face.